right, welcome back. I'm Michael Samatinos, your host, Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. And if you're new to us, we're just extraordinarily passionate about healthcare innovation and adoption. And our aim is to bring you real stories from real people that are innovating within our space. And we've had a jam-packed year this year. If you haven't had an opportunity to check out any of the historical interviews that we've done, go ahead and do that now. Or if you want to shout us out, or if you want to share things, we greatly appreciate it. I'm absolutely ecstatic about today's guest. It's primarily because there's just so much alignment in terms of how we see innovation, how we see how innovation is adopted. And Coby Skonord is the CEO of Ideawake. Just delighted to have you. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me, and really delighted to be here and excited for the conversation.
Totally. So let's start off with let's get a little bit of your background. How did the idea of Ideawake kind of, emanate? How did it morph into what it is today? Let's maybe give a little bit of context to the audience, and then maybe we kind of dive in from there.
Sounds great. So I'd say that the story of Ideawake is one that is not a linear path, as is the journey for innovation, either whether you're a startup or an enterprise organization. But originally, I was, accountant by trade. I'm a reformed accountant, I guess you could say. Got a job at EY right out of college. Ended up putting in my 2 weeks actually on the first day of training, and then starting originally what would become Ideawake. Originally, it was called Ventilator, and we were helping entrepreneurs validate, develop, and launch technology products. Some of those were related to healthcare, but it was all over the board: hardware, software. We helped build everything from textiles, manufactured products to apps. So. Story goes, we did that for about 2 years, learned a ton, helped build like over 500 products in all those different verticals and areas, but didn't make a lot of money. So it's not all about money by any stretch, but when you have investors, right? We had 8 at the time already. And so it was time to pivot, and we actually took the technology and everything that we had learned and started applying it to enterprise. And that's when we ended up getting introduced originally to Aurora Healthcare, just at a event locally in Milwaukee, and then started doing some co-development together, and the rest is history in terms of Ideawake itself.
Phenomenal. That's great. Thank you for the evolution of Ideawake. And as you mentioned, innovation is not a linear path. So how has your definition of innovation evolved from the start of Ideawake to where it is now?
Definitely. And I think the first conversation that you and I had, you had a really good definition for innovation that I really like. I would say the definition of innovation in the beginning was trying to build cool new things is what I thought, right? When I was 22 years old. Over time, it's really gone from building cool things or new technologies to the value that those new things or technologies are going to bring to consumers, right? So it's understanding who your consumer is and really driving the most value possible to that consumer.
Absolutely. So we've been in a really interesting time, especially within healthcare. Things have sped up by about a decade with the inflection of coronavirus, and things continue to go at really, really fast pace. And what I found just extraordinarily fascinating about what you guys are doing is the level of extraction that you're doing of finding innovations within an organization. How do organizations typically extract findings prior to coming, to know Ideawake? Can you maybe take us through a little bit of that process?
Of course. And I kind of cut maybe my original story a little bit short. So what Ideawake turned into and what we are today is we're a platform that helps enterprise companies capture, evaluate, and implement ideas from frontline employees, and really empower frontline employees with a voice. And so to answer your question directly now, Michael, for what folks used to do, or the alternatives are often going to be everything from spreadsheets. Some folks will equate like an annual survey that they do, or they ask like at the very end in a text box if anybody has ideas. So normally folks are doing like a form online, like Google or Microsoft form where people can submit ideas. The process isn't very transparent, and that's really why folks come to us, is that there's no collaboration and employees can't celebrate each other's ideas. That's one thing. And then also, most of the time, folks feel like ideas, once they submit them in those mediums, fall into a black hole.
Well, they mostly do. They mostly do fall into a black hole.
The findings that we have are interesting. So we do our own primary research as well. Some with our customers, some right just with the market in general. And so 1 out of 5 employees stop sharing ideas that have them because of the fact that they felt like their idea fell into a black hole. But the second reason that folks stop sharing from we call it the State of Employee Ideas in 2021. It's a survey we did with 700 folks in the continental US, but that was finding one. But the second reason that people stopped sharing was because of lack of recognition for an idea that they shared that got implemented. So a lot of the time when it goes into a black hole, it's actually being reviewed somewhere. Sometimes it isn't, but the good ones get reviewed, and then when they get implemented and there's no share back or feedback loop to an employee about their idea moving forward, it ends up ruining engagement versus increasing it. And it's just a simple communication now to the organization, celebrating that person for sharing.
It sounds like there's an aspect of leadership that's really important, regardless of whether they decide to implement Ideawake or not. Can you share maybe some observations over the years of organizations that were successful in deploying something, or when they were unsuccessful? So maybe let's talk about both of those situations.
That's a great question. So the tone at the top is key no matter what you're doing, right? From accounting background, that's when you do an audit, you look at tone at the top as one of the major factors. So when it comes to innovation, leadership needs to support it, but it can't just be in terms of just saying that it's supported. A lot of the time where we find the end state that we want to get to is looking at quarterly reviews at the mid-level management, frontline staff, as well as senior management levels. So whenever you are trying to improve on a metric, right, whether it's innovation or whether it's safety, that metric is going on to a quarterly employee review, and it's actually being measured over time and discussed continuously. That's the thing that's going to determine how you measure yourself and your success in the organization. Also going to determine, I'm sure, bonuses, whether you're going to get promoted, right? So the end state that we want to get to is actually baking it truthfully into the organization's DNA versus through continuous feedback and through the quarterly reviews and how folks are measured on terms of success. How we get there, though, that's the nuanced piece of it. And it's just as much of an art as it is a science. So how we tried to scientifically define it is we have this framework that we call crawl, walk, and run. So leadership at the beginning says that they support innovation, and I genuinely believe that folks do. The problem is that innovation is difficult, right? A lot of the time, and folks will try to run before they can walk. So what we do is with this crawl, walk, run framework is crawling is if we want to build the next next Facebook, next iPhone, whatever it is, in order to get there, it's a muscle that you have to build over time. And where we start is just implementing incremental things, and once again celebrating employees and making sure that the mechanics and the process behind innovation is set up correctly. And we can do some really measurable financial things in that first year, first 6 months. There's not going to be their process improvements a lot of the time, right? It's not going to be the end state that you want. But once again, you can't get to that end state without starting at that crawl phase. And I've seen it literally hundreds of times now. Organizations can go straight to building the next, I haven't seen healthcare system build the next iPhone, right? But you get the analogy. It really comes down to, though, your number of shots on goal, right? If you look at 100 organizations, all 100 started with the crawl piece of the framework, they're going to have a much higher probability of success. There are organizations that will be successful going straight to the run phase. It's just that a lot of the time you have a 3-year horizon in order to get a return, right? And show that to leadership. And then leadership gets changed out, or you have a merger after year 1, right? And then you're stuck because you don't know what to do. I know that mergers, right, within healthcare is something that's all too common these days.
Yes. So it's consolidation happening.
Yep.
So on the flip side of that, let's just say you have an organization that is aligned with the crawl, walk, run methodology, which is it's very simple. It's really simple. It's just dang hard to execute because it takes a lot of discipline and determination. What have been some of those factors that you have seen and you've observed that have caused people to derail? You named a couple, which is, change in leadership, maybe some external circumstances. When have things gone awry outside of those two circumstances?
I would say the overarching thing that's going to happen, and this is, it's going to interrelate to the two other points that I just brought up before, but in order to just, the faster that you can, in air quotes, justify the existence of innovation in terms of dollars and cents to the organization, the better off you're going to be when any external factor, leadership change, budgeting change, whatever it is, comes into play. And those things are always going to come into play, and they present themselves in different, shapes, forms, and flavors. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to justify existence in terms of, it doesn't actually have to be dollars and cents. It could be implemented ideas, but there has to be something that is measurable that happens within the first 12 months to 18 months of the program that you can take to leadership and really champion. And we call them enabling events, which I can run through in a separate track or separate question. But making sure that you can get to that return on investment in some way, shape, or form, whether it's implemented ideas, increasing engagement, dollars, right, in or out the door.
Yeah. So it sounds like things that are important to the organization that you're aligned on in the beginning, that are measurable, that you can then showcase to them over a course of period of time. Therefore, you're adding value to many, but you're doing it in a very measurable, consistent way. When you have alignment, I would imagine that some of the successes and stories that have come to fruition are probably surprisingly awesome. Have there been any within the last 18 months that have just really surprisingly shocked you in a really positive way? And if so, to the degree that you're able to share, obviously there's probably some confidentiality that's involved here that you'd be able to maybe share with the audience.
Of course. And I'd love to actually, as you were saying, you had mentioned something on alignment, just to really quickly hit on the point about what goes awry, because this is the number one thing. Actually, there was an assumption that there was alignment 90% of the time when there is a mandate from leadership for innovation, whoever they're going to elect to run innovation, the goals that they set up for that person are setting them up to not be successful from the very beginning, because there's actually a misalignment between what the company goals are, what the business unit goals are, who they have to partner with in order to make pilots happen, and what the innovation team's goals are, at the bottom. So by being able to create the alignment itself in the short term, and that crawl phase is absolutely huge. I'd say that is 90% of companies we look at when we, come in at phase one of this, there's a lack of alignment between those three groups. So I just wanted to make sure to get that out there.
How do you call that out without calling someone's baby ugly? Because it seems to me that the human side of change is something that's quite sensitive, and there's a level of sensitivity when you're coming in and you're trying to innovate, because it depends. Some people view innovation as people are talking about disruptive innovation. By context, it's disrupting what they're already doing, and if they feel like they have something that's going well, you're disrupting them. So how do you really kind of get people to align? How do you herd cats without them knowing that they're being herded, is what I'm basically asking, without you giving away the secret sauce?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's no secret sauce to it. Well, it's meeting people where they are, right? And I can actually define what that, like with some anecdotal examples, what that means. But in summary, meeting people where they are. So you're not going to change. You're coming in, right, as a partner. You're going to get limited access to be, at the C-suite, right, where a lot of the budgeting decisions or the goals are being set. And so you have to meet the organization where it is. And normally how we do that is focus on, when we launch our system, we go to live to 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people. It's first getting leadership excited, regardless of the topic that we're going after. If it's a disruptive topic, new products and services, as an example, and organization has no experience building new products and services, but we want to collect ideas on it. If we engage 40% of the organization, right, it's going to make, and they follow our system to do that, leadership gets really excited, right? And that's an enabling event that we use to get visibility to leadership and start to change the narrative around the types of ideas that we're going to pursue up front. Because you're going to collect a bunch of process improvement ideas, right? When you go to present leadership, it's like, oh my goodness, this is one of the most successful events we've had in terms of engaging this large of a swath, like voluntarily, of the organization. And we say, great, right? So we can pursue these like big ideas. We have this basket of big ideas over here that meet the original purview, but let's also make sure that we start off with some of these smaller ideas and communicate that back out to the organization.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically one giant feedback loop. This mechanism. It's simple,
Yeah.
and yet when you're doing it across a really large audience, what's amazing to me is how that can kind of get watered down. When you mentioned about someone having an idea and then getting disillusioned to share an idea because they never got recognized for an idea that ended up getting implemented. It's such a small thing, but there's someone who took the time to craft a potential solution to a problem and to not get recognized for it. I can honestly tell you that it's probably devastating for someone to not even at least get a mention. I'm not saying you need a reward, maybe even a reward's nice, but not just to not even get an honorable mention. It's like, man, you've gone out of your way to like not give someone praise, and especially in society today, like people work hard. They audit. I mean, praise is free. You can give that out freely.
Yep.
It doesn't cost anything.
True. It's so true. It's just a matter. It's a very simple oversight that has a drastic impact if it happens enough times. These types of programs.
So there's a lot of organizations that have innovation as a value, and sometimes it's just a word on the wall. What has been the difference maker when you are actually seeing people live out that core value from your lens?
It starts. These are things that are simple, that are difficult to find a lot of the time, but it really comes down to senior leadership team or whatever. If we're working with a specific market, right, or region with hospitals or with a larger health system, it's that region's president being a proponent for innovation by helping clear out roadblocks when they come up and how responsive they are to clearing roadblocks. I would say like that is where the rubber meets the road. If innovation is listed as a value, right, that's where you actually see it come to fruition and come to life. And it will take a project that should take 3 or 4 months to implement. The difference between senior leadership being supportive or not and living that value is whether they come to your aid and help you clear the roadblocks to get it done in 3 or 4 months versus 8 to 12.
Yeah, I'm sure there's got to be some frustrating times when it takes 8 to 12 and you're like, can you just help us? Like, help us help you.
Yep.
What have been some other interesting things? It sounds like you're doing quite a bit of work within sort of the healthcare space. And what is exciting for you within the next 12 to 18 months from what you see in terms of what you guys are doing to where sort of healthcare is?
I would say what I'm looking most forward to is getting back to some in-person interaction with folks. So we do some workshops as well. I mean, that's something that really, with COVID has gone away, that's something personally I'm looking forward to. And we never answered to go back to the question as well. I know I didn't want to skip over it for the interesting things we've seen during and pre-COVID, I guess you could say, is that innovation can work, right? So I can give a couple direct stories to that after.
Yeah, go ahead.
One, yeah. So I would say what I'm looking most forward to though, and where I see things going over the next 12 to 18 months is that leadership now understands the importance of hearing voice of employee. Like now more than ever, I'd say, as we've gone more remote, as the operating environment has dynamically changed so quickly, a lot of the time what we saw was for the health systems we worked with, right, there was for the new ones coming on board, there was a complete pause to these programs. But now they're starting to come back. And I would say over the next 12 months, we'll hopefully get, opened up and fully re-engaged to get those programs live. I think that the value of these programs has gone up in leadership's mind. It's just that when you're dealing in the environment we are with COVID, it's very difficult to be able to implement new types of things like this.
Totally. You brought up something that triggered a previous interview that we'd done with Dr. Dennis Humphrey, who, we talked about the human side of change and how that impacts leadership and innovation. And if anyone hadn't checked that out, I'd highly advise it. And actually, he's up your way, by the way. So I'll definitely try to put you in touch with him. I think you guys will, you guys would get along really well. But I'd love to hear, you mentioned about a couple of stories, maybe draw a couple, illustrations for us. I think that'd be kind of good to get the audience to make it a little bit more concrete.
Great. So One of my favorite within healthcare actually ties to the secondary program we run. So we run these innovation challenges, right? People will submit ideas around a targeted topic related to an organizational goal.
Okay.
You gather a bunch of ideas, you engage a large swath of the organization. Then we, narrow down the ideas, get leadership buy-in to pursue a handful of the ideas. So normally it's like, if you're engaging 5,000 people, you capture 500-ish ideas. And then we get that whittled down to like 15 ideas that actually go into like this accelerator program that we also offer. And really the output of these programs and building the entrepreneurship culture is not the idea that you're pursuing, but the person that's being developed as they pursue the idea and changing their way of thinking. So if you're familiar with like lean startup methodology at all, right? So that's really what the program entails and teaches, is how do we go about validating our problem exists, our customer exists, and the solution that we're providing solves the problem for the customer, right? Going through that process, there was a director of IT that happened to go through this program. And when they went back to the IT organization, what they did was their idea ended up getting handed off to a different team, and it actually did get implemented after they did this research. But what they took back to the IT department is that every single request that was submitted, they added a form field on it, 2 of them actually. What customer does this solve a problem for? And how have you validated that the problem exists for your customer? So like, it seems like a small shift, but it is something so drastic, because it's like, that's how you build the culture, right? A customer first culture, which is actually also how I define innovation a lot of the time within healthcare, is being more patient or consumer centric. And what's more consumer centric than putting that into every single IT request form, right?
What about innovation outside of technology? What are your thoughts on process improvements? Where does that fit within your schema of innovation?
So, I mean, everybody's going to have a different definition. You ask 10 different people what innovation means, they give you 10 different answers, right? I put innovation and continuous improvement in the same like spectrum, if you will, right? So like continuous improvement is a core component in order to justify innovation's existence longer term, as I highlighted before. So we are a huge proponent of process improvement. About half the folks that use Ideawake platform use it exclusively for continuous improvement or process improvement. There's so much low-hanging fruit that exists if you've never tapped into frontline team members before in order to get their ideas. Couple of examples: making a form field required took an error rate from 10% to 0, right? On an initial form submission, it saved like 200 grand for an hour of development time, right? It's like there are so many ideas like that out there when you're at scale at an organization. And so if you don't have a continuous improvement program that's tapping into everybody and making it fun and engaging for everybody to share, there's a ton that you're leaving on the table, not just in terms of financial impact, but in the employee empowerment side of things as well, which given the working environment today, I think is more important than ever. So
yeah, I mean, it sounds like what you guys are doing are, you're following a set of principles, which in essence are timeless and agnostic to sort of industry. It's nice that you kind of narrowed down within this particular, focal point, because look, healthcare innovation advances society at large, which I think is not a small thing. It's a big thing. It's a big thing. And when you're approaching it in the way that you're doing it and applying these principles, I can't imagine the awesome success stories that you're going to accrue over long stretches of time. Does that ever hit you as a leader where you're like, whoa, like we're having like some major impacts here? I mean, I can't imagine that it wouldn't, but I'm just from the human side of me, I get so excited. I'm just wondering, you being in this day in and day out, like, how do you deal with that?
It gets me out of bed every morning. That's literally, I mean, that is the driver for all like the, effort and work, and same with everybody on the team, right? It's it's a lot of work up front. You have to work through a lot of obstacles in order to get a program implemented successfully. But just seeing the reaction from like individuals, you can look at the aggregate stats that you get, right? But just seeing from the individuals that it impacts, right? That's really honestly what gets me out of bed every morning. I mean,
when we first chatted, I thought of the story, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up. Acres of Diamonds. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but
Yep.
it's a very, very famous story by Russell Conwell. And when I think of these organizations that you're going after, oftentimes they tend to maybe look outside for innovations, whereas there's literally acres of diamonds sitting right underneath their nose. When do they decide? Let's just say they unearth a lot of these ideas, and maybe they can't necessarily have the development power to technologically build some of these things. When do they know when they go out into the market to bring something in? Is that something that you guys support, help with? Because the build versus buy thing is very much a real kind of conundrum. I'm just curious, sort of your stance and where you're on that.
Yeah, so platform itself technically supports outside in and inside out. That's what we call the two different flavors of the same thing. It's just that by the way, that analogy that you gave with the diamonds was I learned that from you, 2 weeks back. Amazing analogy. Seriously amazing.
Go ahead and use it. I didn't write it, so you could use it. Feel free to swipe and deploy.
I appreciate it. I think that there's no better way to say it, actually, is that a lot of the time, folks, so we will use the build versus buy always comes up, right? Collecting the ideas and doing bottom-up innovation has so many benefits outside of just the ideas that you're getting, right? So all you're doing is basically, by doing the bottom-up innovation side of things, collecting ideas inside and then looking to the outside to bring in different solutions will happen a ton of the time, especially when you're trying to build new products and services for healthcare organizations where your core competency is not building things a lot of the time, right?
Right.
It makes a ton more. IT is scheduled until 2028 at this point, right? In terms of like budgeted time. So even if it's a software product, hardware product, whatever it is, oftentimes there's a lot of solutions out there, but actually originating that solution from a frontline employee and making them feel empowered to pursue it has a lot of benefits beyond just, once again, the idea itself. It's growing the person. The system itself, like we see investment arms, right? So there's a couple of different groups within healthcare. You'll have like a venture group. The venture group is normally the one that you think of a lot of the time with innovation, actually, and they're the ones that are often looking for either investments externally to pilot internally, or just out doing like technology scouting for solutions externally to inject internally. I would say between the venture group and the innovation team having a lot of interconnecting, like they talk, but they don't talk enough from what we see. So making sure that there's more interconnection between those two groups, so you can connect what's coming from bottom up and outside in, and bring those, like, they're not mutually exclusive, I guess is the point. And a lot of people treat them as if they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are building a lot of bridges day in and day out. With the internal customers themselves, they're building bridges, and you are mainly being the facilitators of that. That's pretty phenomenal. So, we're kind of getting towards the end here, but I want to just ask, what do you guys have going on? Give a little shout out, tell people about like Ideawake and what you guys are up to, and how they can reach out to you guys, and how people can kind of keep up with you.
That sounds great. Thanks, Michael. So, I mean, just shout out to my team overall across the world. Thank you so much for everything that you do for us and making this all possible. And shout out to you as well, Michael, for building this awesome community and hosting us here. But in order to get in touch with us, if you're interested in running any of these types of programs, whether it's bringing the outside in, or fostering engagement and innovation internally with employees, you can just reach us on our website at ideawake.com. You can see it spelled on my shirt. There's not two A's, it's just one. And then if you're interested, you can literally reach out to me via email at Coby, COBY @ideawake.com.
Awesome. And then just, this is kind of my final parting question is we've got audience members pretty much all over the globe on this, but then we have different facets. We have the digital health entrepreneurs, and we have investors that are tuned in, and then also folks that are innovation on both the provider and payer side. If there's one golden takeaway that you would highlight from this conversation, and one action item that people could take, what would that be?
Ooh, so it's always difficult to break things down to ones, right? So I would say the main action item is, if you are considering if you're considering these types of programs, right, to make it a priority in 2022. So like the specifically engaging frontline staff, I know it's, given everything going on, it's something that I know is being talked about in every single leadership team meeting. So consider this program, right? Not whether it's Ideawake or whether you're using a Microsoft form. Make sure to like look at actually implementing it and prioritizing it, because a lot of the time it gets too lowly, it gets put on the back burner, and it can have a measurable impact on employee engagement. And then I would say beyond that, once you run this program, make sure to just provide feedback to frontline staff. That's like the number one takeaway if you're actually running the program. The program will die over time, right? In terms of like the engagement that you're getting and the ideas you're getting, if you don't finish off the feedback loop, which is very easy to do.
So you heard it, folks. Complete the circle. Complete the circle.
Very easy to say, very difficult to do, I know, but.
Absolutely. Well, look, guys, if you guys found this content helpful to you, would you mind sharing it on social media? Anytime we get new folks that are within our community, it makes a difference, especially when we're trying to advance things forward. So, Coby, I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Hey, Michael, me as well. Thank you so much.
You bet.